My career sucks.
Sex just isn't the same.
What's my purpose?
Where did this fat come from?
My relationship is killing me.
I'll never be happy.
My debt is piling up. I'll never find love. Why can't I be like other gay guys? Hey guys, it's time to get a grip, stop whining, make a bold move, and do something amazing with your 40-plus gay life. Let's get to the show with your Tell It Like It Is host, Rick Clemons, who does his best to never act like a dick or a diva unless you act like one first.
Well, hello, gentlemen of the 40-plus Gay Men Gay Talk podcast. You're here for another episode to, I don't know, what shall we do today? Ooh, how about we talk about connections? How about we talk about sex? How about we talk about being naked and really love being naked, but also finding those moments where if you're not like, I'm not really a person who likes to go out in crowds or something, well, there's some really safe spaces for men to meet. And today I'm going to be speaking with an author who's written a book around this complete concept of like, where are these spaces? What does this look like? We're going to the sex club world. We're going to the bathhouse world. His book is called Naked Love Berlin, and his name is Jin De Luong. And I love the perspective of sex positiveness that he is bringing into this to help you if you're really struggling like making connections, or maybe you want to be more sexually free. I love the direction he's taking with his book, Naked Love Berlin. And he's got another book coming out, which we will talk about. So let's get to it before we all go, wait, we're going to talk about sex and all these beautiful things. So welcome to the podcast, Jen. So glad you're here to share your perspectives with us, man.
Happy to be here.
So you're coming to us all the way from Berlin, right?
Yeah, this is my spiritual home and probably one of the most sex positive cities in the world, definitely in Europe.
Yeah.
And it used to be much more gritty. It used to be known as the poor but sexy city. And the last few years it's gotten a little less poor, maybe a little less sexy, but there's still a lot of hot guys just walking around doing their grocery shopping.
As there are in many cities, but there is something about the European culture, I believe, that there's almost like a sex positiveness. And I'm not saying everybody, but it's definitely elevated from the US and Canada where you come from. So why is this such an interesting thing for you? And why have you decided, hey, I'm going to write books about this?
Well, I've always wanted to write. Ever since I was 14, I wanted to write a book, but I wasn't sure what I wanted to write about. But I knew that as a writer, you should write what you know. And I'm laughing because what I knew was sex. So I spent a good part of my 30s living in Berlin. I had a corporate job, but I was enjoying a side to Berlin that maybe not everyone gets to see. And it was and then there was a period where I was in between jobs and I used that time to write about what I knew. And it was, I know gay life about Berlin. So let's write this down. And what ended up coming on the page was this sex positive story about 4 men and how they navigate this really liberal city. And, but it was because I was just writing what I knew, and I knew I was sex positive living in Canada. The good thing about Canada is that even though people are a bit more reserved, they're not as judgmental. So there is sex positivity. It's just that there's not a lot of experience with that. So especially when me coming from a small city.
Well,
but then
that's not uncommon when you come from those smaller areas.
Yes.
I mean,
yeah.
You know, it's such an interesting thing to grow up in a small community or a small city, or, you know, I grew up in some rural spaces, and go, wait, but I'm not experiencing what I feel like is deep within me, or I'm not seeing the world through a lens that more aligns with who I am. And that can be really difficult. So I'm curious for you, what does sex positivity really mean? Like if you were to put your Jin's definition of sex positivity, what does that look like?
My definition of sex positivity is that as long as it's consensual, maybe sometimes it's borderline consensual.
Okay.
You know, I will park that borderline meaning later on, but it's consensual, borderline consensual, and it's not hurting anyone,
Mm.
and you're constantly getting tested, and you take care of your health. Then the question is, why not? I think that being enjoying sex is enjoying the human connection that we can have with another human, with another person. And it's not necessarily love, but we feel intense emotions, and it makes me feel alive. It makes me feel grateful for whatever life brings. It makes me just happy. And I think to be sex positive means you get to enjoy the companionship of other people. It also means that so that's a sex positive, but there's
Mm.
also secondary effects. So it means you you become very good at talking to complete strangers. You
Mm-hmm.
become very good at finding the joke, finding what's funny, and also this the for lack of a better, the anal retention, it just kind of
Mm.
disappears, and you're just more relaxed. You let life come as you take it, and then when you meet other sex positive people, there is just this bond that happens,
Mm.
and yes, it's something I've noticed with my life.
I really like that perspective of there's this bond, because there's such a, and I'm going to generalize right now, there's such a quote, okay, we recognize sex and that it's a part of our human equation, but to be blatantly talking about it, no, let's not do that. It's it's not puritanical quite. I mean, there
Mm,
are obviously there's groups of people, in the world that like we know, and it should only be for procreation, all this other stuff. But the fact that finding those people that you can bond with, and go with, I think that's such an interesting perspective. My husband and I enjoy going to clothing optional resorts. Not everybody would enjoy that, right? And I'm a big guy. I'm not an Adonis by any stretch of the imagination, but I love just the freedom of being able to be naked and lay outside by a pool and, be in a hot tub, and, there's just freedom of no clothing, right? But it's not
yes.
for everybody. And I think that's the thing of where you find the bonding, Now, do we go to the level of, oh, we're going in like, a sex club or something? That hasn't been our MO at all. But I don't look down on that either. In fact, I look at people who like that's where they find their connection. I actually really support it, because I think sometimes that wherever you can find your bonds and your people, that's where you should be gathering. But there's such a
Yes.
negativity around this sort of stuff. And I'm sure you've seen that and witnessed that negativity, even as you talk freely about it. Would that be a true assumption?
I've noticed. So there's this one beach I go to where there's one part of this is in Berlin. It's called Stadtbad Wannsee, and there's one part of the beach where it's you need to have clothes, but then there's also at the very far end of the beach, it's clothing optional, and it's called the
Mm,
FKK section. And the unofficial gay section is deep within the naked flesh.
mm,
So you walk to the end of the beach, then you take off your clothes, and you become nude with everyone else. And what's fascinating is the clothing section. Everyone's loud and running around and bustling and trying to show upmanship. It's a fascinating thing. I see young people with their clothes on and they're playing games, which is not a bad thing, but they're trying to show who's the bigger alpha or whatever. There's that loud upmanship. Whereas when I go to the FKK section, even though there's a lot of young gay men, we just sit there, we're just chill, we just relax, and we feel like we don't have to prove anything. We can just be ourselves. We can talk to people. People are, I find that when you're completely naked, there's no, you can be very truthful to who you are as a person, and people are truthful to each other. And at least at this Stadtbad Wannsee, people can relax, and um, and also swimming naked is so much better.
Absolutely. That's an interesting observation. I've been on numerous beaches very similar, where there, you start in like, it's the clothes, swimsuits on sort of thing, and then you got to walk and you got to walk, and then you get to the clothing optional. Sometimes you have to climb over a fence, or all these different things, right? And as you were describing that, I thought that is kind of interesting, because my husband and I went to Black's Beach in San Diego last year for the first time. We've always said it was so interesting. We used to live in that area and we never went. And so we're like, okay, we're in San Diego, let's go. And it's a real haul to get down there. I mean, there's two ways down. We're down these really steep cliffs. Okay. One is for like the general public, and then the one that drops you right into the gay area. It's almost like rappelling down a rock. I mean, it's pretty crazy how steep it is. And I have vertigo, so I'm like, nope, not doing that. But even just the regular one, like climbing the stairs, by the time you climb up those stairs, you've had a really good workout, right? But what I noticed is, and again, this just popped in my head as you were describing them, like, that's actually really true. There's a lot of hubbub and everything as you go through the clothing optional area. But as soon as you kind of start to ease into the more gay area, it's a different element. Yes, I know there's guys sneaking off into the dunes and having sex and all this sort of stuff, but there's almost a interesting sacredness to it, right? Like
Yes.
that, I guess that's the way I would describe it, to like, we really get this, And maybe it's because we've been shamed so much into our world of like, sex is not supposed to do this. And then if you're gay and having sex, that's even worse. Let's not talk about it. But I also can't help but think, Jen, and I'd love your perspective on this, if there isn't just almost a relief and a release to like being able to be with our own people,
There is a bit of I think every person goes through the moment, who are my real friends and who are the people that I most connect with. And I think for my journey as a gay man, it wasn't just gay people where I felt that relief and that aha moment. It was also this being with people who just knew I accept myself for who I am. I've done everything that I could to be the best person that I can be, and I accept myself for that. And then when you arrive at that scene, there is that aha moment, that gentle relaxation, that feeling like I've arrived at a place. I don't need to, I've arrived. I can just enjoy, I've arrived. And
do you feel like it's the same way when we get into the sex club bathhouse arena, that it's that same? Because I've only been to, I believe, I have to think back, I think I've only been in one, maybe two bathhouses in my whole life. And that was when I was married to my ex-wife, and I was just like, I'm trying to figure this all out, right? The two that I went to, all I remember is pounding beat music and all that sort of stuff. So it's a little bit different to like, okay, we're chill. But yet there was also an interesting sacredness to that. Now, I will say my husband and I have gone to some Korean bathhouses that are for everyone, right? But they're also very much men in this area, women in this area, right? Because everybody walks around very naked. And I always feel that sacredness in those spaces too. Like there's conversations, but they're not loud and boisterous. But bathhouses are, in the gay world and in the sex clubs, I guess it depends on the club, right?
I will say the atmosphere changes depending on whether the people, well, whether people who go to this establishment they're going to have sex or not.
Mm-hmm.
And so I've been to bathhouses from Vancouver to no to different parts of the world, let's say.
Yep.
And I felt that there's a significant segment of the population, they go and there's a bit of shyness. It's some of it's their first time going to a gay establishment, and maybe they are not necessarily wanting to have sex,
Mm-hmm.
and there is reservation because they're trying to still figure things out, and it's one of the bathhouses is maybe one of the places where you can go and say, I went just to enjoy the sauna, not necessarily to have sex.
Mm-hmm.
And that changes the atmosphere.
Absolutely.
It's different than just going to a club, but when you go to a sex club where, yes, I'm giving permission for people to look at me. I am going to the specific moment, or I'm with the purpose to have this connection with someone else. Your eyes, you've already done you've already assessed how you feel about sex, and been okay with that. So the atmosphere is a lot more easygoing.
Sure.
And
Well, there's a purpose behind it. Let's just say, there's an intentionality behind it. I've had clients and friends who really enjoy the sex club environment, and it's very intentional. Okay. Yes, just for some of them, it's like I'm just trying to escape, but even an escape is an intentional way of being, right? I'm escaping from a relationship that the sex isn't that great, or I'm escaping from my buttoned up, suited up life and going to go, I mean, all you have to do is watch 50 Shades of Grey, even though as contrived as it was, it kind of does reflect like why some people evolve into these interesting spaces of their truth, but yet the world doesn't say, oh, we can express that truth. And I think this is part of it for many people, and I asked this question to a group of guys not long ago because I was running one of my group meetings, and I said, would you disclose, and at what level would you disclose to people in your world that you frequent a bathhouse or a sex club? Because I knew we were getting ready to have this interview. And it was really interesting to see how many were like, absolutely not. I would not talk about this.
Wow.
Which I'm not surprised. So I'm going to kind of set it up a little bit that, this particular group was more of a, many of the guys are still on their journey coming out of the closet. So it probably wouldn't be on their radar. But in a couple of private conversations I had with some friends of mine they've been out for years. They've played the circuit. They've done all these things. One said, I have no qualms about talking about that's what I do. The other one was like, I don't feel compelled to talk about it, but I wouldn't, like, if somebody brought it up, I would join in the conversation, but I'm not going to bring it up that this is what I do. And I think this is an interesting space of where we find comfort in our sex positivity, right? Sex positivity goes a whole realm of how people see sex positivity. Somebody could say, I'm very sex positive. And to somebody else, they're like, no, you're not. You don't do this. You don't do that. I think this is where we need to leave room for each individual to be their own sex positive in a way that works for them. That's the reason when I started the interview, or just a few minutes ago, I asked you, like, what does sex positivity mean to you? So given that you've moved into this space of like, yeah, this is what I do. I've been to, sex clubs, bathhouses, et cetera, across the globe. Have you ever felt uncomfortable sharing that with others? And because obviously you're sharing it on this podcast, so you're not there now.
Before we continue, I don't know if my internet connection is bad. So if I stop my video, is that a bad thing? Because it will.
No. You can stop
I don't
the
know if
video.
my audio is coming through clearly.
Yeah, go ahead and stop the video, and we'll
continue. Okay.
There you go. Is that better, Jin?
Yeah.
Can you hear me now?
I think, yeah, that's just I can hear you clearly.
Okay,
Yes.
so I'm gonna re-ask that whole question so that we get it right.
Okay.
So given the fact that you talk about your own sex positivity and where you've been, and as I said, I've asked questions of groups and different men about all these things. You seem to be very comfortable in your sex positivity. But has there ever been some times where, as you are being super sex positive, where you're like, well, maybe I shouldn't say that around this group of people or that group of people? Is there any holdback in your own world for holding back about how sex positive you are?
Mm, the short answer is no.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason for that is my time in Berlin.
Mm-hmm.
It sounds like a very simplistic answer, but I have never been as happy as when living in Berlin. And there is this openness. It's strange how if you walk through the city and go through the U-Bahn and you see how people live their lives, they live their lives without um, I wouldn't say without secrets, but without that shame, without that people most Berliners are very open towards what makes them happy. So you will see people drinking on the U-Bahn, they're not harming anyone. Um, and and through the years of living in this city, I realized that if I'm not harming someone, if it makes me happy, do it. And so I surround myself with people who are of this mindset. So at work, when I used to have a corporate job, I didn't necessarily say I went to sex clubs, but I would kind of test the waters, like, oh, where did you go last weekend? What? And there was sometimes keywords, or oh, I tried getting into Berghain, but I didn't, or um, I just went to a fancy restaurant. Um, and so it's I if if I sense with some people that they were a little bit uncomfortable with how naughty the topic was getting, I would stop. Not to say I hit it, but to say, oh, okay. I had a nice weekend where I met a lot of people. We had some firm handshakes. and
Gotcha.
and we smiled afterwards.
Yeah.
But when it was with people who you could tell that they were curious and they wanted to know, I could go into a little bit more details. And it was so what um, and tonight I'm actually at a dinner party with friends who are very sex positive as well. And it's and I wouldn't probably have met these people if I had closed myself off and try to hide it. And it's just, oh yes, you test the waters. Who is also kind of sex positive. And when you meet others who are sex positive, you can have great conversations and
Well, absolutely.
lots of great. Yeah.
Well, because, and the whole reason for those of you who are listening that I wanted to have Jen on the podcast, not only to have this conversation, but to showcase like the power of connection, because that's how Jen, that's how you came to me with this. Like, I feel like there's a conversation that needs to be had about the connection and how you can connect at a sex club or at a bathhouse or wherever. And it doesn't always have to be about sex. It can be, but it can also be about consensual sex, or it can just be, I'm here to, just enjoy being in a safe space where I can be how I want to be.
Mm.
And because so many places are beginning to not be available for people to do that, it lends itself to helping men. And this is something that I hear from guys all the time, and it's worth repeating, that making connections with men in the gay community can be really difficult at times. And for some, it's creating a sense of loneliness. And so to be able to say, okay, this may not be your cup of tea, so to speak, but imagine being able to go to a bathhouse. Doesn't mean you have to have sex, but maybe you go just to enjoy the spa. You just enjoy being in the jacuzzi or a pool where you can have conversations. Just because you're in that environment doesn't necessarily mandate it's all about sex, right?
Mhm.
And the same thing with like going to a nude beach or a clothing optional resort. You can make it what you want to make it. And I think that's the beautiful piece. My husband and I were on a trip last year on a cruise from Honolulu to Tahiti, and it was 17 days. It was an all gay cruise, and there was a clothing optional deck on the boat, and it just felt so freeing to just be able to lay on that deck and just be free of clothing and enjoy the warmth, the breezes coming off the ocean, conversations with guys. Of course, you put a group of gay people on a boat, some stuff's going to happen. But for the most part, it was pretty tame, at least during the day. We heard stories about what happened on that deck at night. That's cool.
Mhm.
It wasn't our thing, but it's whatever people choose to make of it. And all of it comes from that space of being in your own loving, caring way of being sex positive in you. That's just one of the things I hear you saying. And I wanted to reiterate that.
Yes.
I'm
Yes.
assuming, Jen, that this has given you a huge amount of confidence too.
It has, because it's also, well, when growing up in Canada as someone of Asian descent, I didn't see a lot of Asian guys on television. So there was this sense of, was I attractive,
Mm-hmm.
or whatever? And and going to these sex positive places, having my adventures, I I do want to. Well, is this bragging? This is a little bit of bragging, but
That's
I've
okay. Go for it,
had
man.
my adventures are in the 4 digits, so I
Mm,
will just leave it as that. 4 digits. A lot of happiness. A lot of happiness was enjoyed,
mm,
and it has given me confidence to know when I enter a room, I can talk to people.
mm,
I don't have to be the wallflower.
mm,
And it's also it's also a fascinating thing, because you then see people who are objectively just physically attractive, but they don't hold themselves with the sexiness or that confidence that makes someone who may be physically less attractive more sexy. And it's this fascinating thing where I've realized attraction is partly physical, yes, but not always. There is that part where it is based on how the other person behaves and how your
right.
chemistry is with each other. And the most physically attractive person is in the room isn't necessarily the most sexy. It's the sexiest person in the room. And uh, so going to these sex clubs, it is a hyper environment where you can see, oh, is where's that attraction coming from? And the more I've come to these places, the more I realize, yes, there is some part that's physical, but there's also a big chunk that is about people's behavior and how.
Hey, Jen, I just lost you.
Grateful for that.
Did you hear me?
I didn't hear you. I hear you now.
Okay. Okay. Well, I'm going to assume, let me write this time down too. Everything you just said, I didn't hear. So I'm going to assume that it's on there. We'll just keep going. So actually, if you can kind of think what you were just saying, like, growing up in Canada and not having Asian, role models, maybe pick up from there. I'm not trying to make you remember everything, but literally you cut out for about 30 seconds there that I couldn't hear. It's probably on there, but just in case it's not, let's kind of go from that point again, if you can.
Yes. So growing up in Canada and being of Asian descent, I didn't see a lot of sexy Asian men in the media. So I grew up not sure whether I was sexy or not. And it wasn't until I went to various sex clubs and I had my successes that I started to feel sexier and more confident with myself. But then I also realized that the sexiness isn't just about physical attraction, but it's also about how one person behaves and interacts with others. And sometimes you can be attracted to someone who may not be your physical type, but there is that sexiness with it. And that confidence comes. It's also funny because sometimes I see at these sex clubs a really physically attractive guy who has no clue, and he's just walking around thinking, why isn't anyone talking to me? You're clueless, aren't
It
you?
is interesting, right? When all the clothes are off, you literally see the exposed person, like literally and figuratively. It's such an interesting thing. Like how many, I'm gonna go back to like, the clothing optional deck on the boats or on at a beach, how like as freeing as that is, and I always equate it to this, at least with gay men, because that's usually, the environments I'm in. There's almost like you can see the little boy within suddenly come out, right? There's like the
Yes.
shyness, or there's the, nervousness, or there's the little bit of boldness. But then if you were to see them off that situation, it's almost like it's a completely different person, so to speak. And to me, one of the most powerful things that I have found in my world by allowing myself to become more and more and more sex positive is I'm not hiding anything. I don't have, there's nothing I have to hide. I speak truthfully about things. Here I am talking about being naked on a boat and being naked on, beaches and stuff like that. If somebody has a problem with it, that's okay. I really respect that. Then don't be naked with me on a beach or at a clothing optional resort or anything, right?
Yes.
That's okay. That doesn't mean we can't be friends. Like, hey, this is just something I do. And I love the energy that comes with being able to observe gay men in their raw state. Not only because, okay, men's bodies are sexy. I think many men's bodies are sexy. Some people go, I can't stand looking at a big old fat guy. I'm like, well, then don't come hang out with me because I'm an overweight guy, right? But there's something sexy about seeing that stripped down essence of a man, whether they're built or they're not built, but just that ability to like just be who they want to be. It's such a refreshing way of being in the world. And I think that's
Yes.
the whole point of what you're trying to bring to this conversation is that sexiness, that spirituality, that freedom, that almost like I don't give a fuck attitude, right?
Yeah.
Like, but it takes some time to develop. You've shared, like it took you time to really get to that. And you've done a lot of homework. If you're in the 4 digits, you've done a whole lot of homework trying to figure this out.
It's yes, it's like being naked and being comfortable with being naked. There's a bit of, I wouldn't say truthfulness, but a bit of authenticity with who you accepted yourself as a person.
Oh,
And
absolutely. I love that. The nakedness and accepting yourself as your authentic. That's such a great way to look at this. And I know there's going to be guys that are listening to what you and I are talking about. Like, I know I couldn't. And that's okay. But there's a naked truth to you somewhere if you're listening to this that's aching. And I don't mean that sexually, but aching to come out, aching to be free. And it may not mean you're stripped down and absolutely naked. It may not mean you're going to a gay sex club. It may not even mean you have to be on a clothing optional beach. But if you're feeling something right now as you're listening to Jen and I speak through this, I'm going to invite you to tune into that because something within you is saying, wait, I want to be heard. I want to be seen. I want to be felt. I want to have this experience. I want to have this emotion because somebody somewhere, Jen probably told them, nope, that's not good. You can't do that. You can't do that.
yeah,
So what do
it's
you hope the book does for somebody who picks up the book or the
I
books? I know you're working on another one, but what would be
yeah.
the hope that you would have for people doing that?
Well, Naked Love Berlin is in the style of Tales of the City, but series one of the 1990s kind of controversial miniseries that was aired on PBS. Um, it is this idea that um, it's a novel. It's based upon my life and the lives of the people I know in Berlin, and it follows these four men as they learn about what love and lust is, and whether it can, whether this can lead to what it can lead to. And what I hope readers get from it is well, first of all, it's an addictive book. So one of my advanced readers, he read it in 2 days, and he stayed up till 3 a.m, couldn't put it down. There's a hit of dopamine as you read about sex clubs in Berlin and the party life, but it's also there's heart to it, because it's not just the idea is the party is only fun when you've earned it, and the earning means coming to terms with your demons, finding the truthfulness of yourself. And in these 4 characters, they found the truthfulness in their own lives as to what makes them happy. And what I hope that gay men find from reading this book is, yes, being truthful to my sexuality, being sex positive, is a way to be happy. And there is some danger to it if you let the lust go to an extreme, and that happens in the book. But if you don't let yourself go to that extreme, you can be happy. And that's what I hope people get from this book.
It sounds amazing. And I think happiness is at the core of this. It's such an interesting piece. Some people get on their high horse and judgmental, space and go, well, I can't believe people would go to sex clubs. I can't believe. Well, if we really are being our truest selves, and yes, I'm passing a little judgment right here, and I'm going to candidly admit it. But if we're really being our truest selves as a group of people on the planet, the LGBTQ plus population, who have been told, you can't be this, you can't be this, you can't be this. I always want to bring it back to center and say, if we're judging how someone else achieves their happiness, especially if it's not hurting anybody else, okay, that's always my caveat. If your happiness is doing you great good and it's not hurting somebody else, then why can't they pursue that happiness through whatever avenues that works for them? And I think you've so beautifully demonstrated that, Jin, today. So anything else you'd like to
add? Thank you for having me. It's I hope people who listen or read my book get a chance to visit Berlin, because it is a very special place. It's kind of like San Francisco was before rents got really high and things got kind of crazy. And maybe Berlin still has that little special feeling. So take a moment to visit one of the sex clubs in Berlin. Lab is my favorite place.
Okay.
And enjoy come to a naked night at Lab, and you're going to get wristbands. Your drinks will be paid for with the wristband. Get your clothes in the bag, and then enjoy what it feels like to be surrounded by hundreds of naked men, where we've given our permission to explore your sexuality in a sex positive space.
What a great way to end. Really appreciate that, Jin. And again, your book is Naked Berlin. He's got another one coming out. What's the name of that one going to be?
So the next one's going to be Naked Love Buenos Aires, but you find Naked Love Berlin wherever you get your books. And I'm going to be working on an audiobook as well.
Awesome. Well, we will have links to Jin's website, to the book, all of that on the show page. And I just want to invite all of you once again to truly, whatever it looks like for you, to step in to living your naked truth your way and being fully out in a way that supports you as a 40 plus gay man. So thanks for being listeners. And Jin, thanks again for being here, man. Really appreciate you.
That's a wrap for 40 plus. Gay men, gay talk, where size doesn't matter. We drop our bullshit, get over our screwed up fears, make bold moves, and live life without apologies. Don't forget to join us on Facebook at 40 plus Gay Men, Gay Talk, where the conversations continue.